Hey, what's up everyone? This is Sanjay Shenoy from Team Pixel Track and welcome to this brand new video in Content Marketing Mastery. As usual, let's do a quick recap of what we learned in the previous video. We learned why do you need paragraphs and how structuring your paragraphs makes a lot of difference in the way you write and the way your readers perceive your content. We also talked about the legato and staccato writing styles wherein legato is more flowy, staccato is more fiery in terms of short sentences, very crisp, punchy, one sentence paragraphs. So it's very important that you need to vary these kind of paragraphs between each other to get that kind of flow and also make it very interesting also. If you use only one writing style, people will get bored and might not be coming back to your blog or any other content asset that we're talking about. We also spoke about the elements of a paragraph and we went over a few tips for writing better paragraphs. Now, one of the most crucial things that are there in paragraphs are sentences. And in this example, and in this video, we'll be talking about writing crisp sentences. It's not enough to write sentences, especially when you're trying to convince or persuade your user to take a particular action. You need to write crisp sentences though, so that you convey whatever you're trying to say to the user very effectively and without boring them. That's what we'll be learning about in this video. Let's dig deep a little bit and understand what more we'll be learning in this video. So I might get a little technical in this particular video, but I feel that it's very important that we get a little technical and understand all the aspects. I think the next few videos will be a little technical. We'll be hovering over a little bit of English grammar and all of that. And it might sound a little boring, but trust me, just hang out and just listen to this and it might be very useful for you. So in this video, we'll be learning what a sentence is, what are the parts of a sentence, and what are the types of sentences that you can have, what is an active voice and what is a passive voice in a sentence, and what are the common mistakes people do while structuring a sentence, how to write crisp sentences, and the tools you can use to write crisp sentences. So what is a sentence? If you go with the technicality, I'll give you the technical definition of a sentence. Basically, it's a group of words that expresses a complete thought, and it always contains a subject, which is a person, place, or a thing about which something is said, and a verb, the action word basically, and the words referencing the subject. So few keywords here are, it contains a complete thought. That's what makes a sentence a sentence. Without you having a complete thought, it cannot be called a sentence. Say for example, I say I walked. It cannot be a sentence because it does not have enough information and it's not a complete thought. So it's very important that you have a complete thought in a sentence, and it mandatorily has a subject and a verb. We'll be talking about what a subject and a verb is in the next slide. And also, very importantly, it begins with a capital letter and usually ends with a full stop, a question mark, or an exclamation mark. So this is what the technical definition of what a sentence is. Now let's try to break down a sentence and see what are the different parts of a sentence that there is. So there are three parts to a sentence. One is the subject, then it's the verb, and then the object. So these are the three things which are usually found in a sentence. You can also have just the subject and the verb, which I'll be giving you an example of, but usually most sentences have subject, verb, object. Some sentences might have multiple subjects, multiple verbs, and multiple objects, which is also completely okay to have it. But for your understanding, for the sake of this particular video, we'll be taking very simple examples, and then you can go around looking for sentences and try to identify what are the different parts of a sentence. So what is a subject? The subject often describes a person or thing which causes the action. So it can be a noun or it can be a pronoun also. The verb is the action word. What is the action that is being taken by the subject? And object is the entity or the thing that is acted upon by the subject. So once you give examples, you might understand this better. So again, the object can be a noun, it can be a pronoun, and it can be an adjective also. So let's take the example of this particular sentence. I walked home. Here I can see that The subject is I, which is a noun, which is actually a pronoun, which I'm referring to myself. And the verb is walked, which is the action that I'm taking. And home is the object. So I walked home. So subject, verb, object. So what you need to understand is not only are these three these three elements are almost always there. In the English language, it is almost always in this particular order itself, which is subject, verb, object. You cannot mess up the order of this. You can't make it subject, object, verb. So, for example, I home walked. You cannot like write it like that, or walked home I. You can't do it verb, object, subject also. It is in the English language, the structure in which a sentence is always subject, verb, object. You will understand the importance of this particular arrangement in one of the future videos where I'll be talking about how to not sound like a non-native writer. So just keep this in mind, subject, verb, and object. So what are the things to remember about this subject, verb, and object? The number one thing, a sentence can have only a subject and a verb also. Say for example, I ate. It can be a subject and verb also. And in the English, the structure of subject, verb also is always in that order. Like I just mentioned, you have to follow this particular order always in the English language. In other languages, some of the other languages are subject, object, and verb. Some languages, very few languages in fact, wherein it is verb, subject, and object. So just keep this in mind. And also, like we said, the subject can be a noun or a pronoun. When a noun, it's name of a place, a person, or whatever. A pronoun can be like I, it, we, us, all of these things. But pronoun is basically referring to a particular noun. So an object can be a noun, pronoun, or an adjective too. Say for example, in the previous example, I walked home. In that case, home is the object, but it is actually not an adjective. So if you are using an adjective, say for example, I walked quickly, that can be a sentence also. So the object can become an adjective too. So it need not necessarily be a noun or a pronoun. So I hope that makes sense. This is some basic grammar that we had to go through before we dive into the other aspects of sentence structuring. So there are different types of sentences. So let's just quickly go through it. The first one is a simple sentence, and a simple sentence can vary in length but expresses only one thought and may contain more than one subject and verb. So for example, my best friend and I study every afternoon. So there are two subjects here. There's one verb and there's one object also. So what you can see here is it's a very one simple thought that is there, and it only expresses one thought. So all simple sentences have just one thought in them. Here the subjects are friend and I, and the verbs are study and the verb is just study. So a compound sentence can be expressing two or more related thoughts, and compound sentences are usually joined either by a semicolon or a conjunction like and, but, or, nor, for, yet, something like that. So when constructing a compound sentence, each complete thought should be able to stand alone as a simple sentence. That's very important. Otherwise, it will not make sense at all. Say for example, my best friend and I study every afternoon. Semicolon, we strive to complete our assignments quickly. Now, when you observe this, I can say my best friend and I study every afternoon. That alone can be a standalone sentence. We strive to complete our assignments quickly can also be a standalone sentence. So a compound sentence is usually joined by a semicolon. You can also add a conjunction here, something like and or because, and make it like a single sentence also. So as you can see, there are two different thoughts and you're bringing it together. And a complex sentence is when a sentence contains at least one complete thought and one or more incomplete thought. So you have so incomplete thoughts usually begin with words such as after, although, as long as, before, unless, since, when and all those things. So let me give you an example. So because my best friend and I study every afternoon, we complete our assignments quickly. So the incomplete thought here is because my best friend and I study every afternoon. So it's a very incomplete thought. If it cannot have like, if imagine if you had just made this sentence in its own way, because my best friend I study every afternoon, it cannot make a sentence. So, but with complex sentence, you're adding one more complete thought to it. Because my best friend and I study every afternoon, we complete our assignments quickly. What is happening because of the fact that me and my best friend are studying afternoon? So very important, simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. Again, just keep all of this in mind. Nobody is going to ask you all of these questions, but the reason why I'm going through all of these things is I see a lot of people making mistakes when they're writing on the forums, when they're writing me emails, when they're writing me texts and all of those things. Not that you have to be this perfect grammar Nazi, but knowing about this really, really helps, and helps you polish the way you're writing in a much, much nicer way. So also in a sentence, what you have is active voice and passive voice. It basically, what active voice and passive voice is how you structure your sentence and what do you put the focus on. I think this is best explained with an example. So I'll give you an example of both active and passive voice. So for example, active voice can be Ram killed Ravan. Now the same sentence can be written in a passive voice, which is Ravan was killed by Ram. As you can see in the active voice, the focus is on the subject. Here, Ram is the subject and killed is the verb, Ravan is the object. So the focus is on the subject. In the passive voice, the focus is on the action rather than either the subject or the object itself. So Ravan was killed by Ram. So which is why this is the major difference between active voice and passive voice. Now you might have heard it or you might not have heard it, but a lot of people suggest that you always write in active voice, especially for your blog content or any kind of content, purely because active voice is normal in the English language. It is how we speak and tell stories. Nobody talks in passive voice unless it's like an academic paper. And sometimes passive voice makes sense, but not always. If you're in doubt, just go with active voice and just straight up say what you want to say. So very important to know the difference between active voice and passive voice. I hope that is very clear. Let's understand why you should be using active voice when you're writing. So the most important thing is the readability, right? So active language or active voice and phrases are much easier to read than passive verbiage, especially for those whose first language is not English. If you try to make it, a lot of people think that just by writing a passive voice, they'll sound a little smarter and you can make it look a little complicated. But trust me, you're not doing that. You're doing the opposite of that. You wouldn't want to do that. You want to make things very simple. So the readability becomes much better with an active voice. Also, you engage with your readers when it comes to active voice. Action verbs and active voice, they help the reader get into the story and directly engage with the reader, because it feels like you're talking to them. And also it helps to persuade. Every content out there is created with the purpose of calling the reader to an action. It can be any kind of action, right? Either by doing business with your company or sharing your content. It can be any kind of action. Using action verbs and active language makes your writing very persuasive and very engaging. So if you want to persuade people into taking a particular action on your blog, it's suggested that you use active voice. And also you kind of keep the momentum. When you write in passive voice, when you don't write in active voice, so to speak, your content becomes very drawn out and less exciting to read. But by using active voice throughout your content, you'll keep your readers from scrolling to the end of the article or leaving the page. The momentum is there. They know what to expect. The weight of the sentence is just at the beginning of the sentence itself. So it's very important that you create that momentum using active voice. And also, more importantly, you can connect. Connection is very important. And any kind of content is meant to provide information in a way that is very easy to digest and very quick to grasp. And if you continuously use passive language, it might sound very academic, and it sometimes really annoys people, right? So when you're writing an academic paper, you can probably use passive voice, but if you're writing content which you really want to put it out on the internet, keep it in active voice. So I told you, I hope the example of active voice and passive voice is pretty clear. And these are the reasons why you should be using active voice when you're writing. So let's try to understand why you should not be writing in a passive voice. The most important thing here is that, a lot of people think just by using long elongated sentences it makes you look very smart, but trust me, you're not. You're just making yourself sound unnecessarily superfluous and too extra. You know what I mean? So don't do that. What you're trying to do is not trying to demonstrate how good your language skills is. Please write it down if you have to. When you're writing content, when you're creating content, you're not demonstrating how good you are at your language skills. That is not what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is you are trying to get the user to perform a particular action. And that's it. Just keep it simple. Whatever the easiest way you can make the user go from point A to point B in your entire journey or your funnel or whatever it is, keep it simple, connect with your readers. Don't try to use long, complicated, elongated sentence for no reason. And like I said, it's unnecessarily elongated sometimes. You do that at the risk of completely obscuring the meaning of the sentence. Sometimes you make it so long and so elongated that when we start off the sentence, by the time we're in the middle of the sentence, you completely forget what is the point of the sentence in the first place. And I remember doing this when I was a student, when I was an MBA student, when I was like writing my academic papers and all of that. And we used to write in passive voice just because we could hit our word count, which is why I thought I should put in this point, and mostly used by students to hit the word count. It doesn't serve any other purpose than hitting the word count. And like I said, active voice is pretty normal in the English language. And look at the way I'm speaking right now, it's pretty active. I'm not saying that, I'm not making it very passive and unnecessarily elongated and all of that. Do not try to show off. Do not try to demonstrate that you can make things complicated. Your idea is not to make things complicated. The idea is to make things very simple and easy to digest and easy to grasp. So what are the common mistakes that people do when structuring a sentence? Again, full disclosure before I begin this part of the video, this is based on my research, my understanding of things, and I am in no manner and some English professor or something like that. This is from my understanding and my observations across the internet from our students and all of that. Please do your own research also, but I feel that most of these things are right, and I've done a lot of research myself to ensure that this is actually accurate, whatever we are talking about here. And most of the things that I've done my own research and put it in the context of digital marketers and content marketers, especially the Indian audience, especially people whose first language is not English. Because what happens is people take the grammatical rules of their mother tongue and apply it to English, which what makes it look very non-native, and it sounds very weird. So there are a lot of common mistakes that people do grammatically. We'll be going through that particular thing in much detail in the future videos, but let's talk about the common mistakes that people do here. So the first mistake that a lot of people do is what I call as a sentence fragment. So this is when a full stop is used after a part of a sentence that does not express a complete thought. Say for example, you study every afternoon, which allows you to you study every afternoon, full stop, which allows you to complete your assignments quickly, full stop. Now you have unnecessarily fragmented a sentence here. You study every afternoon. It doesn't give a complete thought. It does not give you the sense that it is complete. But if you just remove that full stop, you study every afternoon, which allows you to complete your assignments quickly. Now that is a complete sentence. That is a complete thought. So I see a lot of people putting a full stop unnecessarily in the middle of a sentence and fragmenting the sentence unnecessarily. And this is what I call a loose connection. Can't get more desi than that, I guess. So, but yeah, what happens here is that when they try to have sentences with completely unrelated thoughts, just because you can use and but, if you are connecting two unrelated thoughts, it like the grammar will be all over the place and the sentence is going to sound very faulty. So for example, my best friend and I study every afternoon, but my little sister takes dancing lessons on Saturday. Here, so the two sentences are: my best friend and I study every afternoon, my sister takes dancing lessons on Saturday. They are completely unrelated, two independent thoughts. And just because you use the word but doesn't mean that you can connect these two thoughts. I see this a lot. Again, the examples that I've used here might not resonate with you, but go back and see where you're making these kind of mistakes, because you might be making these mistakes in your own way. Sorry, keep your eyes open and try to understand what kind of sentences you're trying to mix together and which are completely unrelated. So when you do this, people will get very, very confused. And I wish I could go around and like start collecting all the kind of sentences that I see for each of these mistakes, which I think I should do, and I will do it. But anyway, so go back and check out your own writing and see where you're making these mistakes yourself. And also omitting a word. Say, for example, studied all afternoon, assignments completed. See, I sound like a robot, just because uh, people think that it's cool to talk like this, or people think it's cool to write like this, but omissions of necessary words, it can result in very awkward and unclear writing. Never ever sacrifice clarity for brevity. You can talk like this probably over a text message or something like that, but do not use this kind of sentences when you're creating content, and it just does not connect with the users at all. When you're texting, it's a completely different thing. You have some level of context, you have some level of understanding between you and the receiver of your text. But if you use the same kind of language when you're writing, it can sound very awkward. This is also something that I see a lot, which is basically wrong usage of commas, and placing a comma between two complete thoughts. It's not recommended. You can rather go with the full stop or the period in which it is. You can also call the period or the full stop. Say, for example, my best friend and I study every afternoon, comma, we complete our assignments quickly. Here, you can easily put a full stop there and start a new sentence instead of putting a comma there. Again, it might seem related, but at the same time, it can totally, you cannot try to connect two complete thoughts like that. If there are two complete and independent thoughts, you might as well use a full stop. Again, this is one of the most common mistakes that I see across. So be very careful when you're using commas. What it does is basically it leads to what I call as a non-sentence. It's a complete, sounds very weird, sounds very incomplete, sounds all over the place. So don't do it. Use the commas properly. Again, I'll be making another video on basic grammars and punctuation and how to use it, but just keep this in mind for now. The next type of mistake that I see a lot is how they place certain words, and just by changing the placement of certain words, the meaning of the sentence completely changes, right? The best way to explain this is using an example. So here we'll see that the word only, I'm going to change the placement of the word only and see how the meaning of the sentence changes completely. So in example 1, only I study in the afternoon, which what you're trying to say here is that I alone study in the afternoon. Example 2 is I only study in the afternoon. Just by moving the word only after I, it completely changes the meaning of the sentence. Here, it means that I never do anything else in the afternoon. I study only in the afternoon. Again, I moved only further down the sentence, and now it means that I never study any other time. So please remember that the way you place certain words completely changes how your sentence is perceived. So use these words very carefully, and this is just one example that I'm giving you, and try to understand how you need to structure and place these kind of words. Okay, so far you have learned what not to do in writing sentences. So once you have made sure that you unlearn all of these things that has been hardwired into you for a long time, and stop making those mistakes, you should actually start seeing your sentences and your writing becomes a lot more clear and a lot more crisper. automatically, but you can take it to another level. You can take it, level it up one more step, and follow these tips to write even more crisp sentences. So let's see what are the things that you can do to write crisp sentences. The number one thing is you can remove redundancy. So I feel that when people are writing, they try to add a lot of redundancy in sentences, which makes the whole sentence so heavy because of all of these words which are weighing it down. So let me give you an example, we'll understand it better. So take for example this sentence: there are many people in the world who don't eat meat. Now, I mean, this sentence seems harmless. This sentence seems normal. It seems very natural. But imagine this being clustered among hundreds and thousands of more sentences. So you cannot like expect people to always have the kind of attention that you would expect them to have. So you can actually rewrite this sentence in a much more better way. You can make it tighter by removing the redundancy. You know what? Just pause the video and see if you can do the same thing with this. How you can tighten this particular sentence, and you can just unpause it and see how I have done it. So if I were to tighten it, I would just go ahead and write: many people in the world don't eat meat. That's it. So there are a lot of redundancy that is removed, which goes back to referring to the people again and again in the previous sentence. Instead of doing something like that, this has the same amount of information without the redundancy. So this is how we can make it slightly crisper and slightly more tighter. So this is the stage you will come when you start thinking not like a writer, but like an editor. This is where you need to start put on your editor thinking cap, if you have one, and just think about how you can make sentences much more tighter. Like I said, you need to remove a lot of unnecessary words. If you're trying to refer to the same thing or explain the same thing again and again, it just becomes too heavy and the whole messaging gets lost. So try not to use too many unnecessary words. And what you can also do is you can rearrange and sharpen it. And this goes again, I'll give you an example, you'll understand it yourself. So let's take this for example: Deepak went home straight after the closing speech by Sanjay. So this is something that again, this seems harmless, this seems fine, but you think you can make it sharper, you can rearrange it and make it much more nicer. Go ahead and pause the video and see what you can do with it. I will show you what I have done with it. So what I did was, this is what I've done. Deepak went home straight after Sanjay's closing speech. So again, I just rearranged the sentence. This is more on the lines of active voice and passive voice, and you can do the same. So instead of saying after the closing speech by Sanjay, it just like the weight of the sentence is just pushed way far in the end. That makes it very annoying to the reader, even if you don't think it would. So make it sharper by rearranging it, by putting in more active voice as much as possible. And what you can also do is you can insert facts. And how do you insert facts? Just remember the 5 W's: the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. Just try to understand and put in these facts in a particular sentence. If you put all of these things, the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why, or if you try to get all of the 5 W's within one sentence, that is amazing, but you don't necessarily have to. But the more facts you put, the more clarity your reader is going to get, right? So the next thing is you need to create images. And what you might have seen this in our own copywriting, in our own writing also, we try to create images. So now, what I mean by you create images is you need to somehow introduce, the senses of the reader, like the sight, smell, touch, taste, and sound. These are the 5 senses that we have. And how can you bring in these senses into the sentence? And what will happen is it will really, really enhance those images in your reader's mind. So what you can do is you can use phrase like imagine this or picture this to signal your reader you're about to paint a picture, right? That's how you can start it, and you can go ahead and paint a picture. Now, the more you invoke those senses, the better it gets ingrained into the reader's mind. So try to evoke those five senses. And say, for example, I'll give you an example. I'll read out a sentence. Imagine a 50 something man in a blue long sleeve shirt, the cuffs unbuttoned, his knuckles thick and coarse. He's on the side of the road, smelling like coal, quibbling over a stack of used cinder blocks with a merchant. So, as you can see, I gave you a lot of hints about the description of the particular topic there. So, the more descriptive you become, the more enhanced it becomes the whole sentence. Again, you after mentioning all of this, you need to understand that when you insert the facts and the images, you cannot make it redundant, you cannot use unnecessary words, and you cannot make it very blunt. So once you put all of these things, remove the redundancy, unnecessary words, and sharpen it and make it very, very nice. So once you do that, your sentences becomes amazing and people would love to read the kind of things you write. So one last thing, there are a few tools that you can use to improve or help you in this particular thing. So one of the tools I'm going to show you, let me just quickly jump into my browser. So this is called the Hemingway editor, and great tool. It helps you most of the things in terms of your sentence and grammar. And there's a web version, so you can just go to hemingwayapp.com. Best part, it's free. So once you've written your piece of content, you can just slap it here and see how it looks, and let's see what it does. So basically, it'll tell you, the first thing it'll tell you is the readability. This particular piece of content is grade 6, so you should be aiming for something below grade 8. So what grade 6 means is that people who are in the 6th standard will understand what is happening here in this particular thing. So which is good. And the yellow is basically lengthy and complex sentences and common errors. So it will highlight lengthy and complex sentences, which we spoke about, and how you can shorten it or split it. And if you see a red light like this, it's too dense and complicated. Your readers will get lost trying to follow its main ring splitting logic. They've done a very good job in explaining what it is. So again, very complicated sentences is very hard to read. It will be highlighted in red. And here what it does is the purple, it will give you a much simpler word for you to use. So instead of say you can utilize, it's suggesting me to use the word use. So you can use a shorter word in place of a purple one. So if it's highlighted with purple, it means that you can simplify it. Adverbs and weakening phrases are helpfully shown in blue. So you don't have to, you can use it or omit it completely depending on what you want. And phrases in green have been marked to show passive voice. So again, pretty much does all the things that you need in making sentences and writing very crisp and nice. So once you write your piece of content wherever you're writing, come and paste it here. And it also has like a lot of formatting things also, so you can do most of your writing here itself. And once you do that, it will make it so much more easier for you to like rearrange things, remove your redundancy, sharpen it, tighten it, make it from passive to active. All of these things you can do with this particular tool. It's a free tool, and go ahead and use it, and let me know what you think of it. Okay, that's about it for this particular video. I hope you learned a lot of things. Again, this was more of a theory video, but this is very, very important. Please keep this in mind. This can be the difference between a good writer and a great writer. So try to make your English as sharp as possible. Again, having said that, just because I say content writing, it need not have to be in English. So all of these things can be applied to any language that you're planning to do it in, and any format that you're trying to do it in. So go ahead there and make it much more sharper, much more crisper, and with the same kind of intensity. So thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know what you thought about this video in the comment section, or you can also send me an email at sanjay@pixeltrack.in. Check out my blog www.sanjayshenoy.com. See you in the next one.